The only request my wife Margaret made as she said goodbye was, "Please don't go to that countryside estate, David. Promise me that." She gripped my hand with what little strength remained, her pleading eyes searching mine. I gave her my word, always respected her wishes even when curiosity gnawed at me. But after several years following her passing, that curiosity finally overcame me, and what I discovered at that property would transform my existence forever. Now I understand why Margaret was so determined to keep me away from there. But before I continue, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories reach. 19 years of marriage with Margaret ended in a hospital room after a devastating stroke that no one could have anticipated. At 60 years old, I found myself widowed with a son in college and a sense of emptiness that seemed infinite. While organizing her belongings, I realized there was much more about my wife that I hadn't known. It was an ordinary Tuesday when her lawyer, Attorney Harrison, called me to his office. 2 months had passed since the funeral. Life continued its merciless march toward normalcy, while I still struggled to understand how to breathe without Margaret beside me. "Mr. David, is there something I must give you?" Attorney Harrison slid a small box and an envelope across his polished wooden desk. Margaret left specific instructions that this should only be delivered after her departure. The box contained an antique key, heavy with a metal keychain shaped like a leaf. The envelope bore my name in Margaret's unmistakable handwriting. "What key is this?" I asked, turning it over in my fingers. "It's for a property in Millbrook Valley. Your wife purchased it approximately 4 years ago, but left explicit instructions that you should only know about it after her death." My heart raced. Margaret had no other properties besides our home. She never mentioned a country house. Most importantly, why did she make me promise never to go there, only to reveal its existence later? "It's called Raven's Hollow," the attorney continued. "Apparently it was the house where Margaret spent part of her childhood. She reacquired it after many years, though it had changed hands several times." "Wait, this doesn't make sense," I interrupted. Margaret always avoided talking about her childhood. When Millbrook Valley came up, she'd grow tense and change the subject. "Why would she buy a house there?" Attorney Harrison adjusted his glasses. "I couldn't say, sir, but there's another important detail. The property has become extremely valuable in the last 2 years. "How so?" "A major developer is constructing a luxury resort in the area. Your wife's property land ended up strategically positioned. They've already made several million-dollar offers for the house." My head spun. Margaret had never been wealthy. We lived comfortably on her engineering salary and my income as a university professor, but nothing that would allow purchasing a second home, especially in Millbrook Valley. And why keep it secret? With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. "My dearest David, if you're reading this, it means I left before expected. Forgive me for all the secrets I kept. The house is yours now. The last 4 years I transformed that gloomy place from my childhood into something I hope you'll consider beautiful. I know I made you promise never to go there. I'm releasing you from that promise now. In fact, I ask that you go just once before deciding what to do with the property. In the study of the house, you'll find my laptop. The password is the date of our first meeting, followed by hope, the word you taught me to feel again. I love you more than I could ever express. Margaret." I pressed the letter against my chest, tears blurring my vision. Even after leaving, Margaret still had the power to surprise me. "I need to see that place," I said. "Almost certainly. There's a complication," Attorney Harrison interrupted. "Margaret's family is contesting the will. Her brother Robert claims Margaret wasn't mentally capable when she purchased the property." "That's absurd. My wife was the most lucid and centered person I've ever known. Still, they've filed legal challenges. Considering the current value of the property, this could become a complicated battle." I tucked the key in my pocket, sudden determination taking hold of me. "I'm going to Millbrook Valley today." 2 days later, after a hurried trip through the Sierra Mountains, I parked in front of a carved wooden gate with the name Raven's Hollow in wrought iron. My heart pounded as I turned the key in the lock. The gate opened with a soft creak, revealing a property far more impressive than I had imagined. It wasn't just a country house, it was a stone and wood mansion, surrounded by impeccably maintained gardens and century-old ravens. A stone path wound through perfect lawns to the main entrance. Everything appeared new or recently renovated. Nothing there suggested the traumatic childhood Margaret resisted discussing. This place had been transformed with love and dedication. My wife's hands were in every detail, though I never knew of its existence until now. My hands trembled as I put the key in the main door. The lock turned with a satisfying click, and I entered the secret world of the woman with whom I shared nearly 2 decades of life. What I saw inside made me grab the door frame to stay upright. The entrance opened to a large room with double height and a stone fireplace. But it wasn't the architecture that took my breath away. It was the paintings. On every wall, in every available space, there were pictures of flowers. Not just any flowers, but roses of every possible type and color. My lifelong passion, which Margaret always supported with silent affection, surrounded me in a gallery dedicated to my greatest love. And there, on a table near the window overlooking the gardens, was a silver laptop with a single white rose placed on the lid. Before I could take another step, the sound of tires on gravel announced I was no longer alone. Through the window, I saw a black car park behind mine. 3 men emerged, all with Margaret's unmistakable facial resemblance. The same straight nose, the same almond-shaped eyes. The Thompson clan had arrived, and from the stern expressions on their faces, they weren't coming to welcome the widower to his newly discovered property. The men approached with the confidence of those who felt they owned the place. I quickly locked the main door, my heart racing. I watched through the side window as they stopped on the porch, whispering among themselves before the oldest, a graying version of Margaret, knocked forcefully. "Mr. David, we know you're there. We need to talk." His voice had the same accent Margaret had when she got nervous. I remained silent, moving away from the door. Margaret's vague warnings about her family had always been emphatic. Now, facing them, my instincts screamed caution. The knocking came again, more insistent. "David, I'm Robert Thompson, Margaret's older brother. These are my brothers Philip and Gregory. We're here about the property." Of course they were, not for Margaret, not to meet the man their sister loved for 19 years. They were there for the house that suddenly was worth millions. I looked at the laptop on the table. The answers I sought might be there, not with strangers on the porch. Ignoring the increasingly aggressive knocking, I went to the table and typed the password. June 15th, 1987 Hope. The screen came to life, opening a folder named For David. Inside were hundreds of video files, each chronologically dated, starting the day after the funeral and extending a full year into the future. With trembling hands, I clicked on the first one. Margaret's face filled the screen, not the pale, emaciated face from her final days in the hospital, but healthy, full of life, clearly recorded months earlier. "Hello, love." She smiled in that crooked way that always melted me. "If you're watching this, it means I left and you came to Ravens Hollow, despite my years of begging you not to come. I should have imagined you wouldn't resist, especially after Harrison told you about the house." A knot formed in my throat. Even now, she knew me so well. "I recorded a video for each day of your first year without me. A year of companionship while you process grief. A year explaining everything I should have told you while alive." She lowered her gaze briefly, then looked back at me with determination. Starting with the reason I came back to buy the house I swore never to set foot in again. Outside, the knocking had ceased. Through the window I saw the men returning to the car, taking papers, conversing with stern expressions. Margaret continued. 3 years ago I was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm, a ticking time bomb I inherited from my father. Doctors gave me 2 to 5 years. I chose not to tell you or Charles. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want our final years lived in death's shadow. Her eyes softened. I wanted to live fully with you until the end, not die slowly in front of you. Shock and anger invaded me. She hid the diagnosis, made medical decisions without me. She denied me the opportunity to prepare, to consciously value our final moments. "I know you're angry now. she said as if reading my thoughts. You have every right to be, but I hope you understand I made that decision out of love, not cowardice. The men outside were making phone calls, pacing the entrance with the frustrated energy of denied entitlement. When I received my diagnosis, I decided to use the remaining time to create something meaningful for you. You've always loved roses. You always talked about having a space just for you to cultivate them someday. So I found the last place anyone would expect me to go, the house I left at 18, swearing never to return. She leaned toward the camera. What my brothers don't know is that I legally bought the house from my father before he died. The old man was bankrupt after years of gambling and drinking. He sold it to me for a fraction of its value, desperate for money, making me swear not to tell my brothers, who still thought they'd inherit it someday. That explained the legal challenge. They believed they had rights to property Margaret had legitimately purchased. The house was in ruins when I bought it, David, just like in my childhood, but this time I had the resources to transform it. Every business trip in the last 4 years, I was here supervising renovations, building something for you. Outside, the brothers were approaching the door again. This time, Robert held a document against the window for me to see, some kind of court order. My brothers will come for it, Margaret continued in the video, her expression hardening. They never wanted the house until last year when the developer started the resort project. Suddenly, the worthless property they mocked me for buying became a gold mine. They'll try anything to take it from you. One of the brothers was on the phone again, his expression triumphant as he hung up. In the bottom drawer of this table is a blue folder with all the legal documents you need. The house is unquestionably yours. I made sure of that. Margaret's face softened. But David, whether you keep it or sell it is entirely your choice. I built this place for you, filled it with beauty for you, but I don't want it to become a burden. A police patrol was coming up the driveway. The brothers watched its approach with satisfied expressions. One last thing, Margaret said. In the greenhouse behind the house, you'll find the collection of rare roses I spent years cultivating. The team I hired will continue caring for them, whether you're here or not. They're my final gift to you, along with the means to appreciate them. The video ended, freezing on Margaret's smiling face while the knocking on the door resumed, more authoritative. Mr. David, Civil Police. We need you to open the door, please. With a deep sigh, I closed the laptop, took the blue folder from the drawer, and went to face whatever came next. As I reached for the doorknob, my cell phone rang. Charles, our son, calling from university. I hesitated, then answered. Charles, this isn't a good time. Dad. His voice was tense with irritation. Why didn't you tell me about Mom's house or the developer's proposal? The uncles just called offering me a fair deal if I helped them contest the will. What the hell is going on? So they had already contacted my son. The realization ignited something protective and fierce within me. They weren't just coming for me. They were trying to manipulate my grieving son. I'll explain everything later, I promised, watching the officer converse with the brothers. But Charles, don't sign anything. Don't accept anything. Those men are not our friends. Dad, if there's money involved. This isn't about money, I interrupted, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. It's about what your mother wanted. Please trust me. After a moment of silence, he sighed. Okay, but call me as soon as you can. I hung up and opened the door to face a young officer flanked by the 3 Thompsons, whose expressions ranged from smug to openly hostile. Mr. David, I'm Deputy Martinez. These gentlemen have a court order requesting an inspection of the property as part of an ongoing inheritance dispute. I smiled calmly, channeling the strength Margaret always admired in me. Certainly, Deputy. But first I think you should see this. I handed him the blue folder containing Margaret's documentation. My wife anticipated exactly this situation. Robert stepped forward with a dismissive gesture. Family disputes are complicated, Deputy. My brother-in-law is understandably emotional and confused. Actually, I interrupted, I'm neither emotional nor confused. I'm a widower on property that legally belongs to me, facing 3 strangers who happen to share my late wife's DNA. I turned to the officer. I'd appreciate if you reviewed these documents before allowing anyone onto my property. Deputy Martinez took the folder, his expression neutral as he began examining the contents. The Thompson brothers exchanged glances, their confidence visibly wavering. I thought about Margaret's video, the secret she kept to spare Charles and me unnecessary suffering, the magnificent gift she created in her final years. Whatever game her brothers were playing, I was determined not to lose the final tangible expression of my wife's love without a fight. Deputy Martinez looked up from the documents. His expression changed. These appear to be in order, sir. Clear deed transfer, notarized statements, certified bank records of the original purchase. He turned to the brothers. Gentlemen, I see no grounds to force an inspection today. This seems to be a matter for civil courts. Robert's face reddened with anger. This is absurd. That man has no right. That man, I interrupted calmly, is Margaret Thompson's husband, and I have every right to be here. As the brothers retreated reluctantly to their car, followed by the apologizing deputy, I felt a strange mix of loss and discovery. The wife I thought I knew completely had kept secrets, some painful, others of stunning beauty. Now I faced a choice: retreat to the safety of my former life or dive completely into this unexpected legacy and the battle that accompanied it. I closed the door, returned to the table, and reopened the laptop. Tomorrow's video awaited me, and with it more parts of the woman I loved and was only now beginning to fully understand. Outside, the Thompson brothers might have lost this skirmish, but their expressions as they departed made one thing clear. The war for Ravens Hollow had just begun. I spent that night in Margaret's house, or rather our house, surrounded by evidence of her secret labor of love. Sleep eluded me completely, my mind churning with revelations. The fatal illness she hid, the transformed house, her brother's determination to claim it, and the hundreds of video messages waiting for me on the laptop. At dawn, I explored the property properly for the first time. The main house was a masterpiece of renovation, blending original rustic elements with modern comfort. Every room reflected careful consideration of my tastes, from the library stocked with first editions of my favorite books to the reading corner overlooking the garden, perfect for autumn mornings. But it was the greenhouse that truly left me breathless. As promised in Margaret's video, a stunning collection of roses occupied the glass space, some so rare I'd only seen them in specialized books. A blue heritage rose, nearly impossible to find, blooming proudly as the queen of the place. "Good morning, sir." The voice startled me. A middle-aged woman appeared among the plants holding a spray bottle. "I'm Sarah. Your wife hired me to care for the roses." "David Thompson," I replied, extending my hand, though I suspected she already knew. She smiled warmly. "Mrs. Margaret talked about you a lot during her visits. She said you had a special touch with plants that she never could master. Did you know my wife well?" Sarah hesitated. As well as she allowed anyone to know her, I suppose. She was here at least once a month for the last 4 years, supervising everything personally. That sounded like Margaret, methodical, detail-oriented, always preferring to do things herself rather than delegate. "That blue heritage rose there," Sarah continued, pointing to the flower I'd been admiring. "She spent almost 2 years searching for it, said it reminded her of one you saw once at an exhibition and never forgot." My heart constricted. The rose exhibition in Rosewood 10 years ago. I had commented on that flower only once, and Margaret remembered. "Did she ever mention anything about her health?" I asked hesitantly. A shadow crossed Sarah's face. "Not directly, but in recent months she worked harder. She'd labor for hours like a woman with an expiration date." The confirmation hit me, but it also explained the hurried quality I'd sensed in Margaret during her final months. I attributed it to work stress, never imagining she was creating all this while knowing her time was limited. "Her brothers were here yesterday," I mentioned, watching her reaction carefully. Her face hardened. "They started lurking around since Mountain Resorts announced the project, suddenly very interested in the family house they hadn't visited in decades." She adjusted the irrigation system before continuing. "What can I say about them? Robert is the eldest. Has an investment firm in Chicago. Always treated Margaret like he was doing her a favor by acknowledging her. Philip is the middle one, lawyer, good with words. Gregory is the youngest, always in Robert's shadow. She shook her head. When Margaret came back to buy the property, they mocked her for wasting money on a hole in the middle of nowhere, until the resort started being planned. This fit with the fragments Margaret had shared over the years. Her difficult childhood, her escape to university, her reluctance to discuss her family. They'll be back, I said, more to myself than to Sarah. Certainly, she nodded. But Mrs. Margaret prepared for that. She always thought several steps ahead. Back in the house, I forced myself to eat something before opening the laptop for the day's video. Margaret appeared, sitting in what I now recognized as the house's library. "Good morning, my love. I hope you slept well in our new home." She smiled that crooked smile I missed with physical pain. "Today, I want to show you something special." The camera moved as she walked through the house, down a hallway I hadn't explored, stopping at a locked door. "This room is just for you. The key is in the first drawer of the nightstand, the silver antique one with the rose engraving." I paused the video, went to the master bedroom, and found the key exactly where she described. Following Margaret's path in the video, I located the discreet door at the end of the east wing. The key turned smoothly. I pushed the door open and gasped. A fully equipped art studio filled the large corner room, bathed in perfect light from floor-to-ceiling windows. Easels, canvases, paints, brushes. Everything an artist could desire, arranged with loving precision. I hadn't painted in 15 years. After art school, I abandoned my artistic dreams to teach literature, to support us while Margaret built her career, to raise Charles. Over the years, someday became a distant dream, then a bittersweet memory of a path not taken. The video continued, Margaret's voice bringing me back to the laptop I'd carried with me. "You gave up so many things for us, David. Your painting was the first sacrifice. Though you never complained, I always promised myself I'd return it to you someday." Tears blurred my vision as I inspected the studio. The professional materials, the reference books organized on shelves, the windows oriented to catch perfect light. "There's something else," Margaret continued. "Look in the cabinet under the window bench." I walked to the cushioned bench near the window overlooking the garden, now golden in morning light. Underneath, built into the wall, was a cabinet I might have missed if not told to look for it. Inside was a flat file box. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid and fell to my knees in shock. My paintings, dozens of them, all the work I'd created in university, pieces I thought had been lost in our moves over the years. Margaret had preserved them, protected them, kept them for 15 years until she could return them to me in this perfect space. On top was a small canvas I recognized immediately, my final project before graduating. A self-portrait of a young man looking toward the future, eyes bright with possibilities. Margaret had asked to keep it the day I finished it. Attached was a handwritten note. "He's still there, David. The man who painted with such passion and vision. I gave you the space, the rest is up to you." I pressed the note to my chest, overwhelmed by love and loss in equal measure. Margaret had seen me, truly seen me, in ways I hadn't allowed myself to be seen in years. The sound of vehicles on gravel tore me from that emotional moment. From the studio window, I saw 2 cars approaching, the familiar black car of the Thompson brothers, and behind it a silver one I recognized instantly. Charles had arrived, and from the way he confidently got out of his car and walked toward his uncle's, it seemed they had already begun working on him. My son, Margaret's son, with his father's dark hair and my stubbornness, was smiling and shaking hands with uncles he'd never met before. Whatever fragile peace I'd found in Margaret's posthumous gifts evaporated at this new complication. The battle for Ravens Hollow had just become much more personal. I watched from the window as Charles exchanged friendly greetings with his uncles, his body language open and receptive. At 21, our son had his mother's analytical mind and my determination, but he lacked Margaret's patience and my caution. He was always quick to form opinions, slow to revise them. My cell phone buzzed with a message from him, Arrived with Uncle Robert and the others, coming in now. We need to talk. Uncle Robert. They'd known each other less than a day, and he was already claiming family connection. I tucked Margaret's note in my pocket, locked the studio, and went to face this new alliance. They entered without knocking, Charles using a daughter's familiarity, the brothers following like wolves behind an unsuspecting guide. "Dad." Charles hugged me briefly, then pulled back, his eyes scanning the impressive room. "This place is incredible. Why didn't Mom ever tell us about it?" Before I could answer, Robert stepped forward, his resemblance to Margaret painfully sharp. "David, I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. We were surprised by your sudden arrival, just as you were by ours." His conciliatory tone didn't match his calculating gaze. Beside him, Philip and Gregory maintained carefully neutral expressions, though Philip carried a leather folder that undoubtedly contained legal documents. "Charles," I said, ignoring Robert completely, "I thought we agreed you wouldn't get involved with your mother's brothers until we talked." He blushed slightly. "They called again early this morning with a very reasonable proposal. I thought I should at least hear them out in person." His chin lifted defiantly. "Besides, they're my family too. Family you didn't know existed until yesterday," I reminded him gently. "Only because Mom kept them away from us," he retorted. "Just like she hid this incredible place. Don't you find that strange? What else was she hiding?" The question cut uncomfortably close to the revelations in Margaret's videos. "Your mother had complicated relationships with her brothers," I said carefully. "She had reasons for the distance she maintained." Robert made a dismissive gesture. "Ancient history. Brothers fight, especially in difficult families like ours. What matters now is moving forward together." "Exactly." Charles nodded with the seriousness of someone who believed they were being perfectly reasonable. "Uncle Robert explained it all to me. This house has been in the Thompson family for generations. Mom bought it from Grandpa Thompson, but it was always meant to be shared among the brothers eventually." I suppressed a sigh. They'd been working on him for less than a day, and he was already repeating their version of events. "And the sudden interest in the property has nothing to do with the luxury resort being built next door?" I asked gently. Philip stepped forward, opening his folder. "The real estate situation is just one aspect of the complex legal picture. We've prepared a fair settlement offer that honors Margaret's wishes, while recognizing the Thompson family's historical right to the property. We're prepared to be very generous," Robert added, placing a paternal hand on Charles's shoulder. "A third for you, David, a third for Charles, and a third divided among us brothers. Everyone wins." Charles looked at me expectantly, clearly already convinced by the proposal. "It makes sense, Dad. We don't need this huge place. We could sell it all, keep millions, and Mom's family stays united. Your mother specifically left this property to me," I said, looking Robert squarely in the eye. "Not to you, not to her brothers." "Confusion and misplaced sentimentality," Robert replied softly. "Margaret wasn't thinking clearly in her final years." A flash of anger burned through me. My wife was perfectly lucid until the day she died. "Then why so much secrecy?" Gregory spoke for the first time, his voice softer than his brother's but no less sharp. "Why hide the property purchase from husband and son? Why the elaborate arrangements with the lawyer? These aren't the actions of someone thinking rationally. I thought of the videos, the renovated house, the art studio. Every element meticulously planned as a final gift. Nothing suggested confusion or impaired judgment." "Dad," Charles said, his voice softer now, "I know it's difficult. Mom left us and now we're discovering all these secrets. But this proposal makes financial sense. We'd both be secure for the rest of our lives." The door opened behind them, and Sarah appeared, her face concerned. "Is everything all right, Mr. David?" I saw the cars arrive. The brothers turned, visibly irritated by the interruption. Robert narrowed his eyes. "This is a family matter. Sarah is my employee," I said firmly. "She's welcome in my house." "Actually," Philip intervened, "her employment situation is among the disputed assets pending resolution of our legal claim." Sarah didn't back down. Mrs. Margaret hired me personally. She made me promise to take care of the place and Mr. David if anything happened to her. We'll review all employee contracts, Robert said dismissively. I'd heard enough. I think it's time for all of you to leave. I looked directly at the brothers, then softened my gaze as I turned to Charles. Except you, of course. You're always welcome. You won't even consider their offer? Charles asked incredulously. I'll review any written proposal with my own attorney, I replied. But I won't be pressured in my own home. Robert's conciliatory mask fell, revealing the ruthless businessman beneath. This property is worth tens of millions with the resort project. We can do this amicably, or we can make things very difficult. Is that a threat? I asked more calmly than I felt. A reality check, he corrected. You're a university professor facing a legal battle against adversaries with significantly greater resources. Margaret may have had good intentions, but she put you in an untenable position. I thought of the blue folder with its meticulous documentation, the videos showing Margaret's lucid planning, the property representing her final act of love. I think my wife knew exactly what she was doing, I said calmly. Now please leave. Charles seemed torn, looking between me and his newly discovered uncles. I think I'll go with them for now. We have more to discuss. He kissed my cheek quickly. Think about the offer, Dad, please. I watched them leave, a sense of emptiness expanding in my chest. In just 24 hours, my son had been drawn into the orbit of men Margaret had spent her entire life avoiding. Sarah waited until the cars disappeared down the driveway before speaking. Mr. David, there's something you should know, something your wife asked me not to mention unless absolutely necessary. I turned to her, mentally exhausted but forcing myself to pay attention. What is it? It's about the true extent of the property and what's really hidden here. She gestured toward the greenhouse. We'd better walk. Some things shouldn't be discussed inside the house where walls might have ears. As I followed her through the garden, the morning sun illuminating the beautiful property my wife had secretly created, I was certain of one thing. Margaret had anticipated this battle, maybe even Charles's vulnerability to his brother's manipulation. The question was whether she'd prepared me enough to win a fight I never knew was coming. Sarah led me past the main greenhouse toward a tool shed I hadn't yet explored. Unlike the perfectly renovated structures throughout the rest of the property, this building maintained its original rustic appearance, deliberately unimproved to seem unimportant. Your wife was a careful woman, Sarah said, producing an old iron key. After her brother's first visit last year, she became even more cautious. They visited before? Margaret never mentioned that. Sarah nodded gravely. They appeared unannounced as soon as they learned about the resort project. Your wife was here supervising construction of the art studio. They didn't recognize her at first. She'd grown her hair longer during treatment. The casual mention of Margaret's treatment hit me like a wave of renewed pain. While I naively taught literature classes, my wife was here, sick, creating this sanctuary while defending herself from her predatory brothers. What happened? She watched them from a distance, then left without revealing herself. That night she made changes to the property plans, starting with this. Sarah opened the shed door, revealing an ordinary interior. Gardening tools, equipment, particles of dust dancing in shafts of light, entering through cracks in the walls. Sarah moved confidently toward the back corner, moving several stacked boxes to expose a trap door set into the concrete floor. Your wife installed this entrance last winter. The workers thought they were building a wine cellar. She pulled the heavy door up, revealing a sturdy ladder descending into darkness. After you, I said, curiosity overcoming apprehension. I followed Sarah down the stairs. At the bottom, she flipped a switch and lights came on, revealing a concrete tunnel extending ahead of us. What is this place? Your wife called it the vault. I call it genius. The tunnel stretched about 30 meters before opening into a large room filled with filing cabinets, a table with computer equipment, and walls covered with maps and documents. Welcome to Margaret's war room, Sarah said with a touch of pride. Everything she compiled about her brothers, their businesses, and the true value of Raven's Hollow. I approached the nearest wall, where a detailed map showed not just the property, but the surrounding area for kilometers. Red markings indicated the resort project locations with handwritten annotations about values, construction phases, and real estate impact. "I don't understand," I said, turning to Sarah. "Margaret knew about the resort project?" "No, initially she bought this place to renovate it for you, pure and simple. But about 2 years ago, when Mountain Resorts began preliminary studies, she hired a real estate consultant to evaluate the impact on Ravens Hollow." Sarah pointed to the map. "They discovered something the developer was trying to keep secret until finalizing all land purchases. The complete project is 3 times larger than they publicly announced." I studied the map more carefully, noticing how the markings extended far beyond the area the press had disclosed. Phase 2 of the resort will include a golf course that will need part of the property adjacent to ours, Sarah continued. "They've already purchased almost all the necessary land except Ravens Hollow," I concluded, beginning to understand. "Your wife verified with 3 independent specialists. This property's strategic position can completely block the planned expansion. Without it, the project loses half its projected value. So the property is even more valuable than her brothers imagine. Exponentially, but that's not all." Sarah moved to a file cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. Margaret documented decades of questionable business practices by all 3 brothers. Tax evasion, insider trading, client fund misappropriation. Enough evidence to ruin them professionally if it came to light. I leafed through the meticulous documentation, recognizing Margaret's exhaustive approach to problem solving. Email printouts, financial records, sworn statements from former employees. She'd built an airtight case against her brothers. Why would she compile all this? Protection. Sarah sat at the table, gesturing for me to take the other chair. She knew they'd come for the house as soon as she was gone. She wanted you to have ammunition. I thought of Robert's presumptuous confidence, Philip's legal maneuvering, their quick work to win over Charles. She'd anticipated it all. "Not everything," Sarah said quietly. "She didn't expect them to reach your son so quickly." The memory of Charles's apparent betrayal stung. They are manipulating him with half-truths and promises of wealth, playing on his grief. Sarah nodded. He lost his mother. Suddenly they're offering him a connection to her through shared blood and history, a powerful draw for a young man in mourning. She was right. Charles had always been a mama's boy, sharing Margaret's analytical mind and love of puzzles. Her death left him adrift, vulnerable to anyone offering a connection to her. "What do I do now?" I asked, almost to myself. "That depends on what you want," Sarah replied. "You could sell everything and walk away rich but possibly forever estranged from your son. You could fight the brothers legally using this evidence, which might win the battle but worsen family wounds. Or what? You could do what your wife always did. Think 3 steps ahead and find the path no one expects." I considered that while continuing to examine the war room. On the table was a framed photograph I'd never seen before. Teenage Margaret standing proudly next to a prize-winning rose, her face lit with innocent joy I'd rarely glimpsed in the woman I married. "That was the first rose she cultivated," Sarah said, noticing my focus on the photo. "The only bright spot in her childhood here. Her brothers destroyed it when Margaret was away at school just to hurt her." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Margaret's support for my love of flowers and art, despite having no personal interest in them. The magnificent greenhouse and studio weren't just gifts. They were the reclamation of something precious her brothers had stolen from her. I took the photograph, a plan beginning to form in my mind. "Sarah, does Margaret's laptop with the videos work down here?" She nodded. "There's a secure network throughout the property. Your wife made sure of that." "Excellent. I need to see the next videos ahead of schedule. Then I want you to arrange a meeting." "With whom?" "First my son alone, away from his uncle's influence. Then my lawyer. And finally," I looked at the wall of evidence Margaret had compiled against her brothers, "I think I'd like to speak with the Mountain Resort executives." Sarah smiled for the first time since we'd entered the hidden bunker. You're planning something your wife would approve of. I'm planning something worthy of the woman who loved me enough to create all this, I corrected, new determination strengthening my voice. And I'm going to need your help. Whatever you need, Mr. David, Sarah promised. Your wife gave me a second chance when no one else would. I owe everything to her, and by extension, I owe it to you. This was another facet of Margaret I hadn't known, her quiet generosity extending beyond our immediate family, changing lives I'd never heard about. As we left the bunker, carefully concealing the entrance again, I felt a strange sense of connection with my deceased wife. Not the grief that had dominated recent weeks, but a partnership that somehow continued beyond death. She had left me not just property and financial security, but tools and knowledge to forge my own path. The Thompson brothers thought they were facing a naive widower who was no match for them. They had no idea what was coming for them. In the following 48 hours, I barely slept, fueled by determination and growing clarity about my plan. I watched a week's worth of Margaret's videos in a single night, each one revealing more of her strategy and the depth of her foresight. They'll try to divide and conquer, she warned in one recording, as if speaking directly about my current situation. Robert will be the friendly face, Philip the legal threat, Gregory the silent observer, and they'll target Charles. He's the easiest path to destabilize your position. In another video, she showed developer documents she'd obtained through contacts at City Hall. Mountain Resorts is keeping Phase 2 of the project secret until securing all necessary land. If they discover we know about the golf course before they try to buy us out, the negotiating value triples. Armed with Margaret's insights and my own growing understanding, I arranged to meet Charles at a cafe in town, away from the Thompson brothers' influence and the emotional pull of Margaret's sanctuary. He arrived 15 minutes late, already defensive before even sitting down. I can't stay long. Uncle Robert is taking me to meet some investors this afternoon. Uncle Robert? I repeated softly. You've become very close in 3 days. He blushed. They've been kind and welcoming, which is more than I can say for you. You're treating Mom's family like enemies. I sipped my coffee, choosing my next words carefully. Do you remember that narrative theory class you loved freshman year, about how the same story changes completely depending on who tells it? What does that have to do with our situation? You've only heard their version of this story. I'm asking you to consider there might be another perspective, your mother's. Mom is dead, he said harshly, pain flashing across his face. And obviously she didn't trust us enough to tell us about this place while she was alive. I reached into my bag and pulled out a tablet. Actually, she left something for both of us. What is this? Your mother made videos, Charles, hundreds of them, messages to guide us after she was gone. I turned the tablet around, queuing up the video Margaret had labeled, "For Charles when he needs it." His face went pale. She made videos, she knew she was dying. She was diagnosed 3 years ago with a brain aneurysm, I said gently, finally sharing the truth. She chose not to tell us. She wanted to spare us from watching her decline. That's impossible, she would have told me. But uncertainty was already creeping into his voice. Watch the video, Charles, listen to her. With trembling fingers, he pressed play. Margaret's face appeared. Healthy, vibrant, her eyes crinkling with the smile so characteristic of her. Hello, my brilliant boy. If you're watching this, then I'm gone. And knowing you, you're probably angry about all the secrets I kept. She laughed softly. You never liked being kept in the dark about anything, not even as a child. Tears welled in Charles's eyes as his mother continued. I should have told you I was sick. I should have given you time to prepare, to ask all those questions you're so good at formulating. But I was selfish. I wanted our last years together to be normal, not overshadowed by my diagnosis. I hope someday you'll forgive me for that choice. Margaret leaned toward the camera. But there's something else you need to know, something about my brothers I never shared with you. Our estrangement wasn't some petty family squabble, Charles. They defrauded me out of my inheritance when I was 19. They used my name on false documents while I was away at university. When I discovered it and threatened to expose them, They threatened to implicate me as a willing accomplice. Charles's hand covered his mouth, his eyes fixed on the screen. I left Millbrook Valley, moved to Chicago, met your father, built a life, raised you. That was more than enough. Her expression hardened. But my brothers never changed. Whatever they're telling you now, remember this. They want to control the family property not out of sentiment but pure greed. And they'll use anyone, including my son, to get it. The video ended, freezing on Margaret's concerned face. Charles sat motionless, tears streaming silently down his cheeks. She was protecting us, he whispered finally. All this time. From more than just her illness, I confirmed gently. Your uncles aren't the family connection they pretend to be. They're opportunists who see you as the easiest path to what they want. He wiped his tears, anger replacing grief in his expression. They've been lying to me, haven't they? About everything important. The house is worth millions. That part is true. But they didn't tell you about the complete resort project or why the property is so crucial to the developer's plans. Understanding dawned in his eyes. They're trying to cheat us. Us, I repeated, feeling hope. Does that mean you're back on my side? I was never off your side, Dad, he said, looking down ashamed. I wanted to feel connected to Mom through her family. They had stories about her as a child, photos I'd never seen. I understand, I assured him, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Grief makes us vulnerable in ways we can't anticipate. But now we need to be smarter than them. Together. Charles straightened, his expression shifting from devastation to determination, so like Margaret that my heart ached. What's the plan? I smiled, feeling the first real sense of confidence since this ordeal began. First, we meet with my lawyer tonight. Not the family attorney your uncles want to use, but someone recommended by Attorney Harrison. Then tomorrow we have an appointment with Mountain Resort. Why? Because knowledge is power, and now we know something your uncles don't. Exactly how much the property is really worth to the developer. I showed him the documents from Margaret's war room. They think they're dealing with an uninformed widower and naive nephew. It's time to show them exactly whom they're facing. For the first time since Margaret's death, Charles laughed, a sound of genuine amusement. Mom always said you were the smartest person she'd ever met, that underneath that quiet literature professor was a strategist who could outmaneuver anyone if properly motivated. She really said that? I asked, surprised. All the time. He smiled, wiping away the last tears. She also said the biggest mistake anyone could make was underestimating David Thompson. As we left the cafe together, I felt a shift in this battle's dynamics. The Thompson brothers had inadvertently united us instead of dividing us. They had no idea their apparent initial success with Charles had only set the stage for their ultimate defeat. Later that night, with Charles by my side, I presented my complete plan to the lawyer Margaret had recommended for exactly this scenario. His expression changed from professional interest to undisguised admiration as he grasped the full scope of what I was proposing. Mr. Thompson, he said finally, your wife told me you'd surprise me with your strategic thinking. She was right. My wife, I replied, was right about many things, including her belief in my ability not just to survive her death, but to emerge stronger from the crucible of grief and betrayal. The Thompson brothers arrived at Ravens Hollow exactly when I expected, 10 o'clock sharp, 3 days after my meeting with Charles. Their black car climbed the driveway with the confidence of men who believed victory was just a formality. Behind them followed a silver sedan I didn't recognize, probably their lawyer or financial consultant. I watched from the studio window, dressed not in the casual clothes they'd seen previously, but in a tailored suit I'd bought specifically for this meeting. Appearances matter when orchestrating a reversal, and I intended to present myself not as a grieving widower, but as the formidable adversary Margaret always knew I was. They've arrived, I told Charles, who appeared from the library looking equally professional in a navy dress. His mother's watch, one of his most treasured possessions, prominently displayed on his wrist. Ready? He asked, nervousness and determination conflicting in his expression. Completely, I squeezed his hand. Remember, let them corner themselves first. Sarah appeared. The others arrived through the back entrance. They're ready in the dining room as you requested. I nodded gratefully. Perfect timing. The doorbell rang, and Sarah went to answer with the practiced deference of someone who knew her role in this carefully choreographed performance. "Good morning, gentlemen," I heard her greet them. "Mr. David and Charles are waiting this way, please." They entered with the ease of men accustomed to controlling environments. Robert led, followed by Philip with his ever-present legal folder, and Gregory bringing up the rear. Behind them walked a gray-haired man in an expensive suit who radiated corporate authority. "David," Robert nodded, his smile not reaching his eyes. "We appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. This is Carlos Henderson, Chief Financial Officer of GNT Investments. We thought it would be productive to have a specialist join our discussion about the property's potential. So they'd brought a financial executive to intimidate me with technical jargon and market valuations. Predictable. How thoughtful," I replied pleasantly. "I've prepared the dining room for our meeting, shall we?" I led them through the house, noting their evaluative glances at the renovations Margaret had completed. In the formal dining room, a large table had been prepared with documents at each place, water bottles and coffee, the picture of professional preparation. "Please sit," I gestured. "I think we have much to discuss." As they settled in, confidence still firmly in place, I stood at the head of the table. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to thank you for your previous proposal. It was educational." Robert's smile widened, clearly interpreting my comment as capitulation. "We're pleased you've had time to consider our offer. With Mr. Henderson's expertise, we can discuss the most advantageous arrangement for dividing the property assets." "Yes, division," I said, picking up a remote control from the table. "That's precisely what I'd like to discuss." I pressed a button, and a hidden screen descended from the ceiling at the room's far end. The brothers exchanged surprised glances. Clearly, they hadn't expected this level of preparation. "If you could direct your attention to the presentation," I continued, clicking the remote again. A detailed map of Ravens Hollow appeared on screen, showing property boundaries, topographical features, and its position relative to the surroundings. "This is the complete survey of Ravens Hollow," I explained. "All 25 acres, not just the 10 acres mentioned in your proposal." Philip shifted uncomfortably. "The western section is a non-developable preservation area. We excluded it for simplicity's sake." "How considerate," I replied with irony, "except for one small detail." Another click, and the map overlaid with the resort's complete project. All phases, including the golf course mountain resort, had been keeping secret. Carlos Henderson straightened in his chair, his professional mask slipping as he leaned forward to study the projection with sudden interest. "As you can see," I continued calmly, "Phase 2 of the project extends predominantly through the western section of our property, the acres you so generously offered to exclude from our fair division." Robert's face reddened. "Those projects are just speculation." "Actually," a new voice interrupted as the side door opened, "those projects were confirmed by Mountain Resort's own board of directors." The Thompson brothers turned in shock as Paulo Rivera, CEO of Mountain Resort, entered the room, followed by my lawyer and two executives in formal suits. "What is this?" Robert demanded, half rising. "This," I replied pleasantly, "is a meeting about the true value and future of Ravens Hollow. Mr. Rivera has expressed significant interest in the property, particularly after reviewing the complete documents my wife compiled about the resort project." Carlos Henderson shot a betrayed look at the Thompson brothers. "You told me you had exclusive negotiating rights for this property." "They don't," my lawyer intervened calmly, placing additional documents on the table. "Mr. Thompson owns clear and unquestionable title to the entire property. The documents the Thompson gentleman showed you have no legal value." Robert slammed his hand on the table. "This property has been in the Thompson family for generations. Margaret had a moral obligation." "Moral obligations." Charles spoke for the first time, his voice firm despite his hand gripping his water glass. Like the moral obligation you had to my mother when you defrauded her inheritance, or forged her signature on documents, or threatened to incriminate her if she exposed you. The brothers froze, color draining from their faces. What exactly are you talking about? Carlos Henderson asked, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Perhaps this will clarify, I said, nodding to my lawyer, who distributed sealed envelopes to everyone at the table. Copies of documentation my wife preserved regarding certain transactions involving Thompson family assets. I believe the statute of limitations has expired on some of these matters, but tax authorities might find others quite interesting. Philip opened his envelope, examining the contents with growing alarm. These are private family matters, he stammered, completely irrelevant to the current discussion. On the contrary, I refuted, finally taking my seat at the table's head. They establish a pattern of fraudulent behavior that directly impacts your credibility in these negotiations. Behavior that continued when you deliberately misled Mr. Henderson about your position to negotiate this property. The room fell silent as the Thompson brothers realized the full extent of their exposure. Margaret had documented everything, their historical crimes against her, their recent manipulations, their attempts to appropriate valuable assets while appearing generous. "What do you want, Robert?" finally asked, his facade of confidence crumbling. "I want you to leave Ravens Hollow and never return," I declared simply. "I want you to cease all attempts to challenge my ownership or manipulate my son." "Return. These documents remain private." Carlos Henderson stood abruptly. "I believe my involvement in this matter was based on incomplete and potentially fraudulent information. If you'll excuse me, Mr. Thompson, I'll contact you directly for any future discussions." He shot a contemptuous look at the brothers before leaving. Robert's face flushed as he watched his ally depart. "You have no idea what you're doing, David. The development costs for the western area are prohibitive. The logistics alone—" "Actually," Paulo Rivera interjected, "Mountain Resort has developed new construction methods specifically suited for this type of terrain. We're prepared to make Mr. Thompson an offer that recognizes both the challenges and exceptional potential of this property." As the meeting continued, transforming from the Thompson brothers' planned power grab into my carefully orchestrated counteroffensive, I caught Charles's eye across the table. His slight smile conveyed everything: pride, vindication, and the bittersweet recognition that Margaret had prepared us for this moment, even from beyond the grave. When the Thompson brothers departed 2 hours later, defeated, exposed, legally bound by the agreement my lawyer had prepared in advance, Ravens Hollow's future was secured exactly as Margaret had envisioned. Not divided among greedy relatives, not sold to the highest bidder, but preserved as a legacy for the family she had chosen and loved, Charles and me. As their vehicles disappeared down the driveway, Sarah appeared beside me. "Your wife would be proud," she said quietly. "You handled it exactly as she believed you would." I watched the dust settle on the path, a strange mix of emotions washing over me, triumph mixed with grief, strength emerging from vulnerability. "We're not finished yet," I replied, thinking of the videos still waiting on Margaret's laptop, the future stretching before us. This was just the first battle, but it was a battle we'd won decisively, using the weapons Margaret had meticulously prepared and the strength she'd always seen in me, even when I couldn't see it in myself. The weeks following the Thompson brothers' defeat passed in a blur of practical matters, finalizing documents for our agreement, meetings with Mountain Resort to structure a mutually beneficial deal that would preserve the property's most sensitive areas, and careful inventory of everything Margaret had created at Ravens Hollow. Charles stayed with me during that period, his initial resentment about his mother's secrets transforming into appreciation for her foresight. We established a routine of watching her daily videos together each morning, both finding comfort and guidance in her posthumous presence. "Did you have any idea?" Charles asked one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Any suspicion that Mom was sick or planning all this?" I considered the question carefully, searching my memories for missed signals. There were small things that make sense in retrospect. Her insistence on updating our legal documents 3 years ago, The way she sometimes looked at us during dinner, almost memorizing our faces, her sudden interest in photographing everyday moments. I thought she was just going through a midlife appreciation phase, Charles said, smiling sadly. In a way she was, just not for the reasons we imagined. I sipped my tea, reflecting. The biggest change was how she stopped postponing personal things. Your mother was always a someday person for personal matters. Someday we'd take that trip to Europe. Someday she'd learn photography. Someday we'd renovate the kitchen. Then suddenly she started doing things instead of just talking about them. Charles nodded. She was creating something lasting. Exactly. I attributed it to finally feeling secure enough to pursue some dreams. I never imagined she was racing against time, creating a legacy because she knew she wouldn't be here to see it flourish. Mountain resort executives were surprised when I described my conditions for property access. Instead of selling everything for a lump sum, as most owners would, I insisted on an agreement that prioritized environmental preservation, established strict development limits, and guaranteed the greenhouse and art studio would remain intact. Mr. Thompson, the lead negotiator said, these terms are highly unusual in the industry. Then perhaps the industry needs more unusual terms, I replied, channeling Margaret's quiet confidence. This land is special. It can wait until we agree on responsible methods to develop it. To my surprise, Paulo Rivera, the CEO, was intrigued rather than discouraged by my approach. Your wife mentioned you graduated in literature and arts before becoming a professor, he observed. She said you'd insist on doing it the right way, not just the profitable way. Another piece of Margaret's planning revealed. She'd established contacts with select people in the industry, laying groundwork for negotiations she knew would occur after her death. A month after reclaiming my inheritance, I was in the art studio Margaret had created, sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating a canvas on the easel. After more than a decade away from painting, I finally picked up the brush again, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. Today's subject waited patiently in the greenhouse visible through the studio windows, the rare blue rose Margaret had found, because she remembered a casual comment I'd made years ago. Sarah taught me about rose cultivation, my fingers gradually regaining dexterity I thought I'd lost forever. Dad. Charles appeared in the doorway, laptop in hand. Today's video is different. I think you should watch it alone. I set down my brush, curious. We'd grown accustomed to watching Margaret's daily messages together. Different how? It's specifically marked for day 30. She titled it, When David Starts Painting Again. He handed me the computer with a gentle smile. She knew you'd eventually return to this. Alone in the studio, surrounded by the tools of a passion I was rediscovering, I opened the laptop and pressed play. Margaret appeared, sitting in this same room before the art materials had been installed, the space empty except for the magnificent windows. Hello, my love, she began, her smile warming me across time. If you're watching this, you found your way back to art, back to the passion you set aside for our family all these years. I touched the screen gently, tears welling. I've been thinking a lot about legacy, she continued. What we leave behind, what marks we make on the world. Most people think of legacy in terms of children or wealth or achievements, but there's another kind of legacy, enabling possibilities in those we love. She gestured to the empty room around her. This space isn't finished yet, but in my mind I can see it complete, filled with light and color and your creations. I imagine you in front of an easel, brush in hand, finally giving shape to the visions you've carried inside all these years. I looked at the rose portrait on my easel, struck by how closely it aligned with Margaret's imagination. You gave up so many things for us, David. Your painting was the first sacrifice. Though you never complained, I always promised myself I'd return it to you someday. Tears blurred my vision as I surveyed the studio. The professional materials, the reference books organized on shelves, the windows oriented to capture perfect light. There's something else, Margaret continued. Look in the cabinet under the window bench. I walked to the cushioned bench near the window overlooking the garden, now golden in morning light. Underneath, built into the wall, was a cabinet I might have overlooked if not told to look. Inside was a flat file box. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid and fell to my knees in shock. My paintings, dozens of them, all the work I'd created in university, pieces I thought had been lost in our moves over the years. Margaret had preserved them, protected them, saved them for 15 years until she could return them to me in this perfect space. On top was a small canvas I recognized immediately. My final project before graduating. A self-portrait of a young man looking toward the future, eyes bright with possibilities. Margaret had asked to keep it the day I finished it. Attached was a handwritten note. "He's still there, David, the man who painted with such passion and vision. I gave you the space. The rest is up to you." I pressed the note to my chest, overwhelmed by love and loss in equal measure. Margaret had seen me, truly seen me, in ways I hadn't allowed myself to be seen in years. The sound of vehicles on gravel pulled me from that emotional moment. From the studio window, I saw 2 cars approaching, the familiar black car of the Thompson brothers, and behind it a silver one I recognized instantly. Charles had arrived, and from how confidently he got out of his car and walked toward his uncle's, it seemed they'd already begun working on him. My son, Margaret's son, with his mother's dark hair and my stubbornness, was smiling and shaking hands with uncles he'd never met before. Whatever fragile peace I'd found in Margaret's posthumous gifts evaporated at this new complication. The battle for Ravens Hollow had just become much more personal, but that was a story for another day. For now, I had a painting to finish, a legacy to honor, and a future to build from the foundation of love Margaret had so carefully constructed. The war might continue, but I was no longer the same man who'd received that key from Attorney Harrison. I was becoming who Margaret always knew I could be, if I just had the courage to pick up the brush again.